First is going to be an observation, Assistant Deputy Schneider. You made a comment about legislative language out there about having full and open contracts that you think may impede. But let me explain, I guess, from the perspective of Congress. The purpose of that language that we're attempting to put in legislation is to address some problems. And one of those, of course, is to assure that we don't have a proliferation of no-bid contracts, for instance, or to make sure that we don't have favoritism based on political party affiliation demonstrated in the awarding of contracts. I will agree with you that we have to be very careful that there may be some unintended consequences, which I think we can address, so I do appreciate the import of your observation, but I want everyone to be abundantly clear of why we would have such language. My question to you would be the following, and it was somewhat addressed with the graphs and stuff, but I'm still somewhat confused. In our memo, it says, although the Department of Homeland Security awarded 297 of its 340 contracts to small businesses, the total dollar value of these awards was negative. And in your responses to the chairwoman's questions, let's see if I sort of understand this. Let's say you have 100 small business contracts, each at $1, and that's the upper limit because you're not real sure what it's really going to cost at the end of the process. But at the end of this, you still have 100 contracts fully completed, but you have de-obligated, and you're down to $30 for those 100 small businesses. Now, you would still take credit for contracting with 100 small businesses, would you not?
The number of the small businesses that we contract with doesn't change.
Okay, now and then let me stop you there. Now, do you take, in reporting to us, would you reflect that you have contracted with the small businesses to the tune of $100 or $30?
It would originally be...
No. I want to know, when we look at your figures, are you going to report to us that you invested $100 in small businesses or $30?
The net ultimately would be reported as 30. The process would show a de-obligation in the system of what the excess money was. So initially, the not to exceed would be recorded, and then when the work was done and the work actually came in at less money, what was not spent, because it didn't need to be spent, would then be de-obligated, and that de-obligation would show as a negative in the system. So you would ultimately see the net.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know, maybe my fellow members are going to disagree with me. We are really interested in the net. I think everything else, we understand how you have to do business, and I think it's good common sense to say this is the ceiling and you're not going to exceed it. I understand that. But I think for our purposes, to see what small businesses are really receiving in this country, we need to figure out what is the bottom dollar that any department or agency is actually paying to that small business. That's the reality. Let me move on to something else because I believe our time is going to be up.
In response, I will submit these detailed charts so you'll be able to actually track the flow by state, put in not to exceed, de-obligated, and net.
Now, I understand, but we have individuals out there that are going to be using the not-to-exceed numbers as representing the effort out there by a department or agency. I'm just placing people on notice that to us, that is irrelevant. It is totally irrelevant. If you're the business person on the end of this transaction, I guarantee you it is totally irrelevant. The next thing is about miscoding, and I'm going to quote from the memorandum. In looking at the data, the committee found that hundreds of these contracts had been miscoded. Contracts with fire departments and cities have been listed as small business awards, and then also subsidiaries of bigger companies. Now, you would think, well, some of these subsidiaries may have misled you, but this is the comment that we have in the memo. More often, the companies made no effort to self-identify as small business. The miscoding then largely occurred at the agency level. Now, as it applies to FEMA and to the Department of Homeland Security, how do you respond to that particular assertion in our memorandum?
Well, I'm not sure of the memorandum that you're reading from. Yeah, I'm not sure specifically how that's worded, but let me tell you a little bit about the coding. I went through, after the last hearing, with a contracts expert to actually understand how something gets coded in the system. And I asked the question, like, how many contract actions we have? We have 66,000 a year. So with an experienced contract expert, I went through and I said, show me why it's so hard to enter this data. And what they did was they actually walked me through each of the lines and shows how an experienced contracting officer, sometimes based on the choices you have, can make a mistake. Okay? And so that is why what we do is the following. We've been working very closely with the GSA folks. We've identified approximately 20 different changes that can be made to facilitate the entry. We have an outreach program with all of our contracting people in terms of how we can do a better job of coding. In November 2006 and May of 2007, we reviewed 4,000 entries. And to see how many errors there were, we found errors and we fixed them. What we try and do is figure out where in these lines are the errors being made, and then let's focus on the attention to fix them. The other thing I might point out is this. This is the very last thing a contracting officer does after they basically sign off on a contract. What we have found is that some of the practices vary. Sometimes they actually enter right after they sign off on the contract. Sometimes they wait until the end of the week. Sometimes they wait longer. And the longer they wait, the less fresh it is in their memory, and there is an opportunity actually for more errors. So I think we're aggressively looking at the errors, what causes the errors.
Well, Secretary Schneider, because my time's going to be up. Look, I'm not questioning your sincerity and everything. I think you're finding some of the problems. We just want you to hurry up and fix them. And let me explain why I'm saying that. I've just been handed some information that in the spring, 106 miscoded contracts were identified. You still have them on the books as constituting small businesses when they're not. One of those is the Water Board of New Orleans, and I could name Oakley, Avery Dennison, Global Charter Services, and such. So much of what you've said right now, I don't think you've even instituted. We just want to see something that's a lot more aggressive, much more thorough at addressing these problems. When you're giving us these numbers about how you're engaged with small businesses, they are not representative. And we're starting off with some base information which is incorrect and inaccurate. And so we're starting with a foundation that is faulty and trying to build on faulty foundations. And that's not going to do anybody any good, whether it's Congress or the Department or the agencies. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.